Well, welcome to this edition of the Botanical Medicine Update with me, your host and instructor, Stephanie Georgieff. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. And if you would like to continue enjoying Herb of the Week, you can do that for as little as $1.25 per week. You can see the links in the program notes for details on how you can become a Patreon member and receive all sorts of exclusive content and access to videos before the public. Your support would mean the world to me personally and help keep this channel to continue to give you information that you can only get here and nowhere else. I do not monetize the channel because I personally dislike advertisements, and I do not want to subject my dear viewers to an onslaught of stuff. So please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. For this week's Botanical Medicine Update, we're going to look at some very promising research coming out of China regarding what is called long COVID. Now, as we know, COVID is essentially the cold and flu virus, and the 19 is the variant of this virus that has challenged the globe in terms of health. Long COVID is what happens after a person recovers from the infection, but there are long-term effects on many people which vary from person to person, but they're all uh, kind of inhibiting people's full enjoyment of life. So this research, I think, is very promising. Now, I've always felt that COVID-19 had much to do with climate change. We've been hearing for years about sinkholes in Siberia where large swaths of soil are sinking, and then there's some weird gas coming out of them because the permafrost is melting. Now, if you pay attention to the little blips of news that are simply blips and then no follow through unless you get into some library access to some obscure scientific journals, there's not much to decipher there, but I think it's valid. Now, the other issue I have always felt was related to COVID-19 was the ubiquitous and very severe air pollution, which is affecting people's lungs quite significantly. One of the issues of COVID-19 that caused many to be suspicious and non-trusting of medical science and the media was the evolving nature of the information. We know that the recommendations kept changing from day to day, and it was really because the virus was quote unquote novel, and scientists did not understand how it worked, how it was transmitted, and what the effects were on the body. What no one is really paying attention to now, because of the current destruction of scientific bodies, from the World Health Organization to the National Institutes of Health, decades of research are being erased as we speak. But what's happening is we are actually learning more about the virus as well as its effects on the body and what preventative measures actually work and can be taken and so on. Now, full disclosure, I lost my mother in the midst of the pandemic, so I personally have no patience with the whole plandemic nonsense. For those of us grieving and never being able to have any sort of meaningful ritual for our lost loved ones because of lockdown, this hysteria of government planned hoax. These people that promote this have obviously never been to hospitals during the height of the lockdown. The other thing I want to convey is the entire medication scheme promoting anti-parasitic veterinarian drugs along with antimalarial drugs to treat or prevent COVID-19. The science is simply not there. One study on veterans using the anti-parasitic drug had to stop because the veterans receiving the drug were dying at such a rate that it was considered unethical to continue. And this was compared to the placebo and the control group. Now, you simply cannot convince me of the science or mechanism of a drug that is designed to rid the body of intestinal worms, and this class of drugs is called an antihelminthic, how this has any effect whatsoever on a viruses that attack the lungs. I don't understand that. Now, I'm not going to comment on vaccines, mainly because everyone has already made up their mind on the subject, regardless of what science has to say. So, in the interest of bodily autonomy and sovereignty, you do you, as they say. The thing that never stopped irking me during this entire experience was those who decided not to get the vaccine, why they would just stop talking about it. Don't get it, fine. I respect everybody's choice of healthcare. Everybody has good reasons. Stick with it and stop harping about it. So, what is long COVID? Long COVID, also known as post-acute sequela of SARS-CoV-2 infection, they've also given this a PASC acronym, refers to a wide range of symptoms that persist for weeks or months after the initial COVID-19 infection, even after you test negative. Now, symptoms can vary widely in terms of intensity and duration, but the key is that it has to last for more than 4 weeks. And some people have been dealing with this for years. Now, the symptoms are all over the place, but the big ones are brain fog. And I think we all have spouts of that here and there, that it's difficulty in concentrating, lost memory, lots of fatigue, tiredness, sleep disturbances, dizziness, depression, anxiety. But my goodness, those symptoms could be anything. But this is what people are reporting. They're also reporting shortness of breath, chest pain, palpitations. A lot of people are extraordinarily weak after this, and they just cannot get their strength back. They have muscle and joint pain. And then a lot of people have gastrointestinal stuff like nausea, diarrhea, and stomach pain, skin rashes, itching, hair loss. Now, if you put all these symptoms together, I mean, who doesn't have at least one of these things? But a lot of people with COVID-19, these are very severe. And what they're looking at is basically persistent inflammation or a heightened immune response. Now, as I said, this so-called checklist is quite comprehensive, to say the least. But something that I found really confusing is people would say, that people say, well, you could have COVID-19, but have no symptoms. Okay, so you have all these different symptoms, et cetera, et cetera. So, anyways, I feel everybody's pain and frustration on the confusion, but there's a lot going on, and I wanted to talk about the application of Chinese herbal medicine to long COVID. Now, the interesting thing about Chinese diagnosis, and here's a plug for the Botanical Medicine study course, because we will cover Chinese diagnosis in our Chinese herbs section. So, links in the program notes if you want to participate in that, is how complex the diagnosis is in terms of the application of herbal formulas. Now, when I was in acupuncture school, we had to take a course on an ancient Chinese medical text called Shan Han Lun. And one of our assignments was to review the book. Thankfully, it had been translated into English. And we had to do the assignment on all sorts of different types of diarrhea. Spoiler alert, in this book, which is about 16th and 17th century diseases in China, there are 60 different ways to get diarrhea at that point in history, according to the textbook. And we had to make a chart of this, no pictures, just description, and then memorize each pulse, tongue, etiology, bowel type, and then all the formulas related to that and the modifications. Okay. Can I remember a lot of this? No, but at one point I had a wonderful chart. Now, in allopathic medicine, there are only about five types of diarrhea that you can get. It's bloody diarrhea, worms, food poisoning, flu, and there's basically three different types of medications. Now, the Chinese have 60 different formulas, and it's really interesting. So it's a very specific and detailed diagnosis. That's personally what I love about it, and that the formulas are designed for the individual, not the population. It's for the individual because we all get sick differently. Now, the principles and approach to long COVID, um, I'm going to go back to this other slide, sorry. The TCM principles and approach to long COVID, they're looking at individual syndromes or patterns which lead to personalized herbal formulas. They also target lingering pathogens. And the other thing that the Chinese diagnosis as well as formulas address is they want to strengthen the body. They want to fortify and tonify vital energies. And with long COVID, they're looking at qi, which I'm sure you've all heard that, but it's basically the Chinese term for energy, and yin, which is deeply harmed and deficient in long-term COVID, according to Chinese diagnosis. And the formulas want to support and facilitate the body's natural healing processes and enhance the immune system. So instead of considering COVID-19 as simply a virus, traditional Chinese medicine views long COVID as a syndrome. Okay. And what the Chinese call this syndrome, because of all the symptoms that are shared by this, is called GU, which I think is funny, but it's GU, GU syndrome. And the traditional Chinese medicine practitioners have long been practicing and treating protracted illnesses, and which things that we in modern medicine would see as viruses, bacteria, fungi, or parasites. And the ancient diagnosis was for COVID called goo. And the word goo essentially translates as possessions. And the Chinese character has an image of three worms inside of a vessel. So maybe that's why they call it goo. But this character symbolizes how lingering pathogens can cause lasting symptoms. Now, I've always loved the language of traditional Chinese medicine. I just find it so much, I don't know, more artistic, I think. And what viruses are to us in traditional Chinese medicine, they're called, quote, evil, pernicious influences, which I love, or, quote, external wind, unquote. And the external wind can be either cold or hot. Now, the language is rather, artistic, in my opinion. It's also, I think, very descriptive, but it can be seen as archaic. But when you learn how to translate between these syndromes and diagnostic names, they're actually much more descriptive than many of our diagnostic terms that we use. Now, one of the most useful pieces of information in the diagnosis of GU, or lingering pathogen syndrome, is that the patients often communicate that they've never felt quite right ever since they got over a particular illness. Now, while those health issues never received an official medical diagnosis, that's largely because we've not had many modern global pandemics. But today, a large majority of the worldwide population has been personally affected by COVID-19. So the treatment of GU syndrome is more important than ever, especially with long COVID. The recurrent patient report is, quote, as I said before, I've just not felt right since I was sick. And they often are more susceptible to diseases, especially things like colds and flu. Now, there's two main types of goo syndrome. There's brain goo and gut goo. And we can see when we looked at these symptoms before of long COVID, that's a lot of what is being described. Brain goo affects the nervous system, creating symptoms like headache, pain, anxiety, depression, and gut goo affects the digestive system with symptoms of bloating, gas, diarrhea, loss of appetite, et cetera, et cetera. And gut and brain goo commonly occur together, and either can cause fatigue and feeling foggy headed. Now, COVID-19 hit China very hard, and the lockdowns were very severe there. I mean, people were literally nailed in their houses and would be arrested and thrown into jail or had food withheld if they weren't in their apartments. But some interesting research is coming out of China regarding the use of traditional Chinese medicine and long COVID. And there have been studies reviewing a series of studies. So they do a metadata analysis, which is always really interesting. If you ever read any journals, if they do a metadata analysis, they just look at all the data and what's going on. And then there are also individual studies which are regarding specific formulas. Now, the issue modern science has with herbal medicine specifically is that herbs fluctuate in terms of concentration of active constituents. And the best way to report this, or a way you can think about it, is you know how wine differs from year to year? Some years are really good and some years aren't so good. And that's because, weather changes, there might be drought, too much rain, not enough sun, whatever. And that affects the concentration of active constituents in everything, but particularly herbs. So it can range from year to year. So that's hard to study. Um, but, so they just basically do outcome research rather than try and figure out active constituents. And also, active constituents are difficult to measure, particularly in Chinese formulas, because there can be anywhere from 2 to like 12 different herbs. And so, what is doing what? I don't know what substance is doing what is difficult to say, but I'm always like, do you feel better? I think that's what most patients care about, and not, gee, was it this substance or that substance? But what's really interesting is these are hospital-based studies in Taiwan and China that suggest that personalized Chinese herbal medicine can significantly relieve symptoms of long COVID, specifically fatigue, difficulty breathing, and also depression. Meta-analysis of all the controlled trials in China and Taiwan shows that traditional Chinese herbal medicine can reduce both muscle fatigue and muscle pain. And some research suggests that these formulas can improve outcomes in treatment. And I have personally found this to be really true. I have personally found if there's no contraindication that traditional Chinese medicine coupled with Orthodox medicine actually makes Orthodox medicine more effective. That's been my personal clinical experience. And so there's just a lot of good research on how these formulas are combating inflammation. They have very high antioxidants. They restore mitochondrial function. That's your energy compartments in your cells. So there's a lot of really good outcomes. Now, these are some of the formulas. All of us in acupuncture school, got to, memorize these, and Bujang Yi Qi Tang. Tang is tea. Um, and the other one is called Dangui Xiao Yao San. Another one is Yi Qing Yi Qi. And then the last one is Q Du Chang Fei Yi Hao Fang. And the mod means modified. And so these are the formulas that have been studied, and they all have very positive outcomes. Now, again, sometimes researchers in North America and Europe are a little suspicious. The Chinese tend to be extraordinarily positive about what they're doing, but I also see there's good research coming out. Um, and basically, what they're finding, particularly in a study in Hong Kong, is that individualized treatments could facilitate the resolution of clinical symptoms, and all the ones that I listed. It's like every symptom known to humanity. It actually made them better. Um, so it's just really interesting. The research is interesting and I think promising. So I'm going to read you some of the herbs that have been studied. These are pictures of some of them, not all of them, but the core study, they have what's called the COVID rehab formula, or CRF. And they basically have combined several herbs. One is called Atractylodes, uh, Poraya, which is a type of mushroom. It's also called Fuling, ginseng, which I think we're all familiar with, glycyrrhiza, um, which is, licorice, Pinellia, um, then the Citrus reticulata, which is basically tangerine peels. Um, um, oh, I can't think of the word. Hmm. Folium mori folium. And so these are all these different herbs. They also modified them. They would say if you have more fatigue, you add some astragalus. If you have difficulty breathing, you put something called gualo P in it. If you have trouble with sleep disturbance, you put Shan Sao Ren in there. So it's just interesting when you read all of these things. And for me, it's just interesting to see that. And I go, oh, I know that herb, and we could do this and we could do that. So it's really wonderful to see what this study is doing, and a wonderful, promising treatment for people that are suffering with this. So, in summary, Chinese herbal medicine shows great promise as a potential intervention for managing long COVID symptoms, particularly fatigue and muscle pain. And with any scientific study, they always say more study is needed, but it seems like people are feeling better. So before you go out and try and make your own teas, please get an accurate diagnosis from an acupuncturist or a Chinese herbalist so that you can get a formula specific for you, and make sure you're communicating with your physician and your pharmacist so everybody knows what's going on and you can feel better. So this is Stephanie Georgia saying thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with me. Make sure to check out the links in the program notes on ways that you can support the channel while enhancing your knowledge on how to be healthy with the assistance of botanical medicine. And until next time, be well.